Well, it's not your fault. It's just you're the causes and conditions. You felt freezing, or the thing said below the. Well, that runs that one, and that runs that one. You know that, right?
Welcome. Testing. So normally, hey guys, I'm Jill Marie. I'm the center manager here, and normally I come in the first class just to say hey, but I was busy hanging out, having some fun. And then the next week I was busy having some fun. Haven't had so much fun in a long time. So I was actually hanging out with people from the center. So it doesn't matter. One of these classes, you just pop in and say hello, and I always see such new faces I've never seen before, so it's exciting to see you guys. So how many of you were here last week and the first week? And who's brand new? Karen will probably ask the same thing.
You're not brand new. Well, not brand new today. Not brand new today.
Yeah, brand new
First
today.
time here today.
Brand new today? Okay.
Great, welcome.
Give them
but
the
brand
prize.
new to this.
I'll go get you a piece of chocolate. I forgot I usually throw something in. So Karen's going to talk about your other, so you've already got to experience Karen. I could set this up, but now you already know she's great, except you don't. Karen is great. She's a wonderful teacher and a very good friend. Yeah, we were hanging out the week before with all the friends.
We were.
So she'll tell you about some of the other classes. Oh, one thing the thing I always forget, I just remembered, is we are open during the week, except Mondays now. So a lot of people who are brand new have no idea about this. Brenda's going, I know. And she was very excited to hear about this, right? So you can come in and meditate. You can come in and use this Gampa. You can have a little, you could study in here. You could have lunch outside. On Fridays from 12 to 1, I eat with whoever walks in. Bring your own lunch. And some other people didn't know that. And some we'll have crackers together from the cafe. You can go around the stupa, circumambulate. So you can use this facility, as long as you don't talk to me all day, you can use the facility at your leisure. So I just want people to know that it's open, because a lot of people don't know they can take advantage of having this amazing place to be in, because it's not really normal for centers like this to be open during the week. So not on the weekends except on Sunday. And just feel free to use the cafe, make a cup of tea, enjoy it, and enjoy the class. And you're going to talk about Meditation 101 and DB, right?
I can, but you can mention it now too. Can never mention it too much.
Yeah, there's Discovering Buddhism is in How to Develop Bodhicitta. So they're about 3/4 of the way through a 2-year course, and they're divided into 13 modules. And so you're always welcome to just jump in. Sometimes somebody will come to the last class in a 2-year course of the last module the last night on emptiness. And so we just go.
I did that.
Did you do that? So we usually say it's your karma, which was like class 3. So it could be really heady. If you don't understand it, it really doesn't matter. You can just do Dharma rain. and get it later, figure it out later. You can figure out emptiness later, right?
I bailed.
Yeah, sometimes you're like, I don't even know what they're talking about. But Meditation 101, which I stand in for that sometimes too, that's on Tuesdays. It'll rotate month or every other month with this course. So you can pop into that. And then the main thing that we like to mention is that it's unusual for the centers around the world. There's about 168 now, I think, or 67, that this kind of class we don't charge for. So we don't charge for anything in this center for Dharma. And other places might charge like $10 for a class or $120 for a module. So that is unusual. We rely on donations. So we don't say it's free, but we say donation only. And we do rely on the generosity and the kindness of others to keep everything going, because that's the only way we make funds, donations. There's no other money that comes from anything. Like no mother ship drops anything down on us. Except manna. No, wait, that's the wrong religion. So there's donation boxes in 2 places. Oh, I look like a stewardess there. I always wanted to do that. And you can give online. You can text give. There's little slips about how to text give, which is a really cool thing to do now. And I will hand it over to Karen. And thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here to introduce ourselves. Introduce yourself. Jill's position's relatively new. This is your 2nd year. 3rd. Holy cow, time flies. Yeah. I'm new. Don't know. Good night. So it's awesome to have a center manager. So my name is Karen Mastriani. Welcome. I pulled out some handouts for you that other folks have picked up, and I do have extras if you didn't pick any up. So I'll give it to you after the class. You don't need it now at all. And we'll see if this comes back on. If not, I can say whatever I want. You'll never know. If you brought your cell phones in, just please put them on mute so that they don't bother other folks. Just vibrate or off is good. And we have several, and I'll also give you my email. My email address is up here, and you won't have the benefit of seeing that. But please, you have my email. Use it if you have any questions. I have some answers to the questions from last week as well. So we're going to do a really brief overview and then complete the, hopefully complete the 4 Noble Truths tonight. We'll continue the discussion of mind. But we talked about that last week. And then we're going to give a little bit more detail, especially how the mind relates to rebirth and karma. And those are kind of foundational understandings to have in Buddhism. So we'll start to touch on those as well. They really are central to our Buddhist beliefs. A lot of people, those are 2 that they just kind of have to put on the shelf for a while. But I'll give you the overview for tonight. So let's go ahead and do just a brief meditation and then set our intentions, because that's really critical. So set your intentions for doing this meditation, and then we'll also set the intentions for why we're here this evening. And we'll start with just some breathing, and then, we're just going to do that. Never mind, I'm not going to introduce something else. So if we have time, I'll introduce a different kind later called 9-round breathing, which some people really like and some people despise. And I don't understand that, because there's so many ways you can do that to make it comfortable for you. And that whole idea is we have so many blockages and obstacles. And the whole idea of 9-round breathing, Geshe-la teaches it all the time. It's just to clear our minds, clear our energy channels, remove obstacles, so it can be quite powerful. And we'll do that later. So go ahead and sit in a comfortable position, thinking about the 7 postures, but especially keeping your back nice and straight but relaxed. Chin slightly down, and your eyes closed. And if that's not comfortable, at least with your gaze downward. And just take several nice deep breaths, really diaphragmatic breaths. Pull that air in from your belly, pull it up through your chest, and then just slowly exhale. Just slowly releasing the air, your belly the last to deflate. And then just return your breath to a nice, comfortable, relaxed rhythm, trying not to force anything, just breathing gently in through your nose and out through your mouth. And let go of any stress or tension. And just set your intentions for this meditation to begin to develop that focus, concentration, that mind training, to keep our attention on the object of our choice, which right now is the breath. And you can either focus at the tip of your nose, just really focusing on the sensations as you breathe in and out through your nose, or you can focus on the rise and fall of your belly. And just count your breaths. Each inhale and exhale is 1. And count to 10. And when you reach 10, count backwards to 1. And then you can start over again if you'd like. And as thoughts pop up, or you notice you're following some sort of a storyline, just as soon as you notice, just gently and kindly, without judgment, just return to the object of your attention, the anchor for your mind, which right now is our breath. Even if you have to start counting all over again as 1. That's the practice, is noticing and returning our minds to our breath. So let go of counting and just return your attention to the sensation of your breath. And dedicate any insight or positive merit gained by this practice so that you can continue practicing for your own benefit and happiness and the happiness and well-being of others, if you can stretch out to that intention. And then just set the intention for being here this evening. And really just acknowledge the commitment you made, that you're keeping that commitment to keep learning more and more. It's huge. Just walking in the door can be intimidating. Hey, welcome. I didn't even hear you come in. Some people are so quiet. I'm like a bull in a china shop. Everybody knows I walk in. Okay, so our plans for this evening, well, we talked about that a little bit. We are going to talk about the 10 non-virtuous actions as well. And I'm going to go through these in case that pops back up. Quick review, and then we're going to complete the 4 Noble Truths and answer any of your questions that may have popped up. We started out talking about the life of Shakyamuni Buddha, and I'm just going to say he was a man born a little over 2,500 years ago. He saw suffering, it was unbearable, and he became enlightened. He sat under the Bodhi tree until he realized reality. He removed all delusions, negativity, obscurations in his mind, and only attained positive states of mind. And then he went on to teach the path for all of us to be able to do this. And he taught for 40 years. I gave a history of our lovely center. I met Jill at a campground in Pennsylvania. We were at His Holiness's teaching that she heard about it, and I was feeling all sorry for myself that we had to camp and we couldn't stay in a nice hotel where everybody else was. We had a blast, but anyhow, she was there camping and had never even heard of our center. So how fortuitous was that we just happened to start talking, and then she learned about the center and then started coming ever since. So you just never know when karma's going to ripen, which we'll talk about tonight. We talked about the spread of Buddhism. So to correct some information that I gave last week, Zen Buddhism is Mahayana, which I said, but I wasn't sure about Thich Nhat Hanh. Somebody asked about Thich Nhat Hanh, and it is a Mahayana tradition. Like as soon as I started my car up, I thought, of course, what was I thinking? You know, the Vietnamese tradition is Mahayana, and so is Plum Village and Thich Nhat Hanh. And we have actually a lot of, I won't say a lot, but we have a handful of Vietnamese members who practice Tibetan Buddhism. So, I mean, there's similarities, and everybody kind of goes back and forth. And then the other question that came up was about when were the Buddhist teachings actually written. And as soon as I left here, because I could remember the 11th century Lama Atisha, but then I remembered Shantideva was the 8th century, and Nagarjuna was a few centuries before that. But I learned that it was right after the Buddha was teaching that they start being documented. So it was well before before Christ, and a lot of the teachings were documented within 100 years after the Buddha died. So it was during his life, and then right after that, in the Pali language. And then when Buddhism spread to China, Chinese were the second to document. So they did a lot of the documentation. But as Hetty said that really didn't matter. It wasn't like anybody knew it was documented or anybody had access to that. It was purely an oral tradition passed down generation to generation, and it still is today, even though that there was writings. And I think those were the only questions that did come up. So we talked about how Buddhism spread. We talked about the Tibetan Buddhism views of the mind, which we'll spend a little bit of time talking about today. Anything stand out to you for the Buddhist view of the mind? Anything in particular? Oh, thank you for remembering. She just holds out her hand.
That it's not physical, that it's about attitudes, and it's more about consciousness.
Great. Yeah, those are a couple of really key points. So your mind and consciousness and awareness are synonymous. It's not like your mind is aware. Your mind is awareness. That's the whole function of our mind. And it's not physical, right? A lot of people associate the brain and mind as one. They certainly depend on each other, but they're unrelated because the brain is physical, the mind is not. It's formless. What else?
I wrote down, I thought it was important to me, the mind is constantly changing and we can change it. So it kind of gives me a little bit of optimism that just your attitudes and where you're at, we have the power to
Doesn't matter.
change it.
Yeah, that's huge. And that's really new. It's not so much new anymore to Western thinking because now we have neuroscience, but this was never new to Buddhism. The mind is completely malleable, completely changeable. And that gave me so much hope to realize they're just habits of mind, and we can change our habits of mind. Doesn't mean it's easy. Takes effort, right? Like any change does, but it can be done. I know many who are living proof of that, and I'm one of them. No. Other thoughts? I think the only thing I have to add is that the two main qualities are that clear luminosity, I guess just that clear luminous mind, because we really already talked about awareness. Okay, did any other, and then we started the Four Noble Truths, which we'll finish today, so I won't say too much about those. Did any other questions come up during this past week? Okay. If you think of some as we start, please don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask. All right. So, the Four Noble Truths. And I actually think we got through the information that I wanted to cover. So this is actually going to, for the most part, it's going to be a review. So the first, and let me just say, the Four Noble Truths were Buddha's first teaching. They are foundational to even understand karma, to understand renunciation, to understand all the things we're going to be talking about tonight. Foundational. And Geshe-la in last Wednesday's teaching said they're foundational for compassion, and they're foundational for any topic in Buddhism. We're going to talk about the foundation of all good qualities and the Lam Rim. We may talk about that a little bit tonight, but that's why suffering was the Buddha's first teaching. If we don't get this, then we're not going to pay attention to some of the other teachings that he's going to give us. Like this, we have to get. So the first noble truth was the truth of suffering. And, we take responsibility for our own happiness as well as our own suffering. And they're both just these reactions in our mind. You can't see my slides, but the term used for suffering is dukkha, D-U-K-A, which actually probably a better translation is dissatisfaction. So it's just that general dissatisfaction with things. And we know this on a mundane level. We use examples, right? You know, you get a new car and it's all shiny and you love it, and then you see a prettier color, or the newer model comes out, or, you know, the new iPhone, and then a new one comes out. And so you just know that sense of dissatisfaction, that whatever it is we buy or get isn't always going to last, and even if it does, it doesn't always make us happy. Interesting. My slides keep going off. It's like this is trying to do something, Chris, but that's all right. So dukkha, and it is doing something. That's why it's shut down. Thank you. Okay. And then there's 3 types of suffering. We have the suffering, the suffering of change, and all-pervasive or compounded suffering. And the suffering is the one we're all too familiar with. You know, sickness, getting old, aches and pains. Yeah, my AARP renewal card came in the mail today, and it was just like, yeah, I own that description. All right. I stopped fighting it. But all those sufferings of change. And then suffering of suffering. And then we have the suffering of change, because that was just a good reminder. Yes, you know, we're getting old. Things do change. You know, we walked in this room, it was really cold again tonight. You weren't in here, so we heated it up, and we heated it up so much we shut down Chris's AV equipment. And now we're all hot, and we're waiting for the room to cool down. So things are constantly changing. And when things are bad, we look forward to them changing, even though we wallow in it for a while. But then when we're really happy or things are good, we act like it's not going to change and it's going to stay that way forever. So we're shocked and upset when it does change. So we constantly go back and forth between that. And then all pervasive suffering we mentioned as that really is a suffering of cyclic existence. And we'll talk a little bit more about cyclic existence, because it's what we're in now because of our karma, and we keep coming back over and over again because of our habits and not changing our mind, not changing our actions, and that importance of being able to change our mind and our actions and our speech. So that's the first noble truth. Suffering exists, it's everywhere. You can look at the happiest, richest person in the world, living in the best house, having any luxury they could ever want, and their suffering is as real as ours. And that's what we have to remember. And we have to not forget when things are really good, that despite it being really good, you know, I'm going to enjoy it while it's here, but I'm not going to pretend it's going to last forever, and suffering still exists. Suffering still exists. I'm still going to get old. I'm still going to get sick. My loved ones are going to get sick. My loved ones are going to die. I mean, suffering just exists. And not denying that. So, I don't know if that's because of the issues with the with the projector that you can't see on my slides, but it doesn't matter, or the whole slide. The truth of the cause of suffering is the second noble truth, and suffering has a cause, and that's the good news, because if it has a cause, then we can find out how to stop that cause, or how to get rid of that cause. So it's really easy for us to think that happiness has external causes. It's my great job that makes me happy, or my great partner, or having this new car that makes me happy. So we see things as being done to us as making us happy. And then we see things as done to us that make us suffer, especially, you know, the suffering. It's always kind of external. They did this to me. He did that. She did that. My boss did that. My coworkers did that. It's because of my kids. We always see this external reason for our unhappiness. And if everything was perfect, we wouldn't suffer. So we don't see that it's all in our minds completely. I mean, even saying that, we don't see it, you know. You just have to really pause and sit with that to make that sink in. Not just when we're talking about it, but every day remember when something happens that it's my mind. It's my mind that's not that terrible things don't happen. They do. There's the suffering of suffering. It exists. It's real. And there's traumas and tragedies, but we add suffering to that suffering by bemoaning it and ruminating and, you know, really making it far worse on ourselves. So it's just looking at how do we stop the blame game and internalize most of what's going on. And if you think about it, we don't all react the same way to sufferings or when things upset us. And there's all kinds of examples of that. I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, enormous sufferings. I mean, walked across the Himalayan mountains in 1959, lost his homeland, lost everything. The tragedies in Tibet are still going on today. And, you know, His Holiness witnessed that firsthand, yet, you know, he's constantly, I'm sure he's constantly smiling. He's constantly laughing. He doesn't hold any anger in his heart, and he's really devoted himself to a peaceful resolution. And he has no anger towards the Chinese government. He sees them as his teacher. At that teaching where I met Jill was in Pennsylvania, and when you walked in to hear His Holiness teach, there were hundreds of people protesting. Remember I mentioned the new Gadampa Center. Somebody was asking, are there less ritualistic options of Buddhism? And there are. And then there's also that new Kadampa Center. And I said, just to be careful, depending on what you're interested in, the new Kadampa Center does not follow His Holiness. So when you walk in, you won't see any books by His Holiness or any pictures of His Holiness. So they were there protesting. They have lots of funding. I'm not sure where their funding comes from, but they would be screaming, like you couldn't even hear yourself think. Like my stomach would be in knots walking into this teaching, and they would be calling His Holiness names, like, you know, they'd chant like he's a liar, and oh, it was awful. It was so awful. And then after about the 4th or 5th day, somebody asked His Holiness, how can you take that, and what should we do? And he just laughed, and he said, oh, I have complete compassion. He said, although I'm a little worried, they're going to get a sore throat from all that yelling up there. he just not, why add to the suffering? It exists, it's them. You know, he can't do anything about it. It was just lovely. But even on a local level, think when hurricanes happen here or floods, you see a lot of angry people. They lost their homes. They lost their possessions. You see them acting in anger. There's protests. There's looting. But then you look at other people where they say, well, I have my health. I have people that I love. We're going to be okay. We can rebuild this. It's just stuff. Like they don't get upset. So you can just see the reactions every day. You know that the suffering's not out there. It's how we're dealing with it that matters. So, and the causes of suffering, according to the Buddha, are these afflictive states of mind, these negative actions or negative karma arising from those states of mind. And there aren't 4, there are 6 root afflictions, and they're ignorance. What is showing up? There's ignorance, anger, attachment, pride, doubt, and wrong view. So anger and wrong view are the 2 not showing up there. And so ignorance, we're going to talk a little bit about that the last class, a little. It's considered to be the root of all our suffering. And it has to do with our fundamental delusion of how we see things as existing and how the Buddha taught that things really exist. And that's that fundamental delusion that we'll talk about later. And this delusion really is based on our karma, why we can't see things as they really exist. And then anger, which is never helpful or good. Never, ever, ever. It's just so ironic that it feels so self-righteous and so good. But if you think about it, whenever you've been angry, like, how did you feel after? I usually feel terrible when I say something or I'm upset about something, because it just doesn't ever feel good at all, ever. And it doesn't do any good. Think about people who either were angry with you or you saw in an angry conversation. You never say, oh man, he's tough, she's showing them, you know, what it means. No, you usually think, geez, you know, what an out of control jerk. You know, like some of the first things that you think of. Even when you think that anger is important or needed, it's usually not. So another word used for anger is aversion, and it really is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And so if you think about when you're angry, even when the other person does some mean, despicable things to you, which usually, you know, it does happen, it's usually because on some level you didn't get what you wanted, and that's what you're more upset about than anything. So that attachment is underneath our anger, jealousy, our outbursts. Even our impatience, you know, we're waiting in line, it's not fast enough because, you know, we have someplace important to go, and it has to do with us. It has to do with us when we're getting angry. And we tend, with that anger and aversion, we exaggerate the negative qualities of an object. We almost wish harm to that object, or we want to avoid him, her, it. And then the third one is attachment, which we see as good, because we're attached to our loved ones, our pets, our possessions, and there's nothing wrong with loving the people we love or liking you know, our possessions, or getting pleasure from them. But it's that attachment to them, that grasping, that clinginess, that we act like they should never go away, it should always stay perfect, they should always be there for us. And that's the problem when we cling. Instead of just enjoying things and then when they're gone, we want it to last. We hold on to that attachment. And so it's not, Venerable Rabina gives this great example. Did I ask before if anybody had ever heard Venerable Rabina talk? I can't remember if I asked. So she's a Western nun that usually comes here once a year. She didn't come last year, so maybe she'll come in 2018. I'm not sure. She's from Australia, and she's a spitfire. People, you know, enjoy coming, but she had this story. She has great stories that she tells. Yeah, some I wouldn't repeat, but you know, she always says it's fine to enjoy like chocolate cake. But what do you do when you go to a restaurant and you ordered a chocolate cake? It's like whatever, the best thing on the menu, and they always have some fancy name, right? Deep, dark, whatever, heavenly chocolate. And you order this cake and you're ready for it to come, and the waiter or waitress comes out and hands you carrot cake. And then you say, well, excuse me, I ordered chocolate cake, and then they say, sorry, we're all out of chocolate cake, but you know, everybody really likes our carrot cake, so I brought you a piece. How do you react to that? Do you say, well, okay, great, I'll try your carrot cake. I wanted chocolate, but good, yummy carrot cake, I'll try it. Or do you say, I ordered chocolate cake, that's what I wanted, how dare you bring me carrot cake, you know, like it's on your menu, you didn't tell me, you know, like how do you react? How do you treat the person that brought the message? That's the attachment. Enjoying the cake if it came would be perfectly fine. If it doesn't come, that should be perfectly fine as well. So it's not, you know, not getting what you want. So pride is the fourth one. Our pride, our reputation, our ego is one of the hardest ones for us to let go of. Even when we think we're not attached to the reputation, it usually, you know, comes up and gets us. And this is that grasping on this inherently existing self, this I, that, you know, and we act like these things are mine. And if somebody calls us a name or says we did something, like that's when you see it really come up, especially if we didn't say that or we didn't do it and they're accusing us. You know, man, that's the strongest sense of ego and pride that, you know, you can see full force when that happens. So it's a kind of an exaggeration of our own good qualities based on whatever. Wealth or position or good looks or whatever transitory thing that's there that's not going to last. So it's this enhanced, mistaken view of who we are, and it's self-cherishing, right? We all have that to an extent. Some of that is just biologically ingrained. We want to survive. That's how we got here, evolutionary, right? You know, we survived through whatever was trying to eat or kill us. And so we have that strong sense of self-preservation, sometimes at the detriment of others, because we think we should get the last bite, we should get the best seat, we should have the best job, we should have gotten that promotion. Whatever it is that goes through our minds, we put ourselves before others, we protect ourselves. And just even think about it on next time you go to the grocery store. You know, walk by the apples or the oranges and just see this nice display of apples or oranges. And then watch what happens when you put this nice fruit that you're looking at, when you put an orange into your buggy. It becomes my orange in my buggy. And if somebody else takes your buggy by mistake, it's your buggy. It's your orange. You didn't even pay for it yet, but you get that mine, you know, it's mine. So you see that self bubble up there, and that ego, that pride in just some small way. And it's really based on that first one of ignorance, that we don't see things as they really exist, and we really believe in this strong, inherently existed I, which we will come back to again. I think it might be a little bit next week and then the last class. And then doubt is the fifth one, and doubt in our ability to grow and change, or doubt that what the Buddha says was true. Now you're questioning that now, and some of you are just curious, and you may or may not believe it, but and you might say, this isn't for me, you know, it's just not for me, I don't get it, I'm not sure about rebirth, and that's fine. But when you have that doubt and you ignore this, then the Buddhist teaching is that this would be one of the causes of our suffering, because we doubt it, we're not doing anything to change, we're not doing anything to make ourselves better, or to kind of wrestle with these kinds of topics. And that would be a cause of our suffering. And then wrong view is just not seeing things as they truly exist, and being okay with that. So just not wanting to try to see things otherwise. Or you feel like things are permanent, that, yeah, there's an I, I'm sitting right here, I'm talking to y'all, I exist. But it doesn't, you know, and I see in my mind how I want to exist. You all see me exist. I don't even want to know how you see me existing, but you see me existing completely different than I see myself in my mind. I know that for a fact, because things are impermanent and constantly changing, and we all have different views, and what's the right view? And so it's just that, not seeing things how they exist. Maybe seeing false things as being true and true things as being false. So those are the 6 causes of our suffering from a Buddhist perspective. Good. And then the third, yes, please. Thank you. You guys are good.
Which one of these does jealousy fall into? Which category?
So jealousy is one of the delusions that we all struggle with, right? And it's similar to to anger. We're going to talk about jealousy again, but it's like anger, jealousy, all those things that cause those aversions kind of fall into one clump.
Okay.
Would you agree with that, Hetty?
Yes. Yeah.
Chris? Yeah, it's one of the delusions. I say anger, jealousy, and patience, but they're all delusional minds, and they fall within that anger. Good question. Okay, anything else? And actually, I think a lot of our anger comes from jealousy. You really can see that bubbling up. All right, so the third noble truth is the truth of the cessation of suffering. We can end this. We can end all the afflictive emotions, the disturbances. They're not an inherent part of our mind. And we talked about this, and I mentioned that it's like poison in water. The water is still pure, and we can remove the poison. Might not be real easy, but you can filter that poison out, and you're left with that clear water. They're adventitious. They can be removed. And we can reach nirvana, and we can have freedom from suffering and become enlightened. And then we did talk briefly about the fourth noble truth was the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. And the Buddha said there's suffering, there's a cause of suffering, suffering can be eliminated, and then he said, and here's how you eliminate it. And he gave us the path, which is called the Lam Rim, which actually means path. It's one that we can follow. It's not necessarily easy. It's not quick. Most of us want things now. When I think about this might take eons, it gets kind of overwhelming. Geshe-la says, think of it like surfing. You're just surfing. You're one step closer to the shore. But it really is a simple path in those 3 nice volumes. But we're going to, I brought handouts. I might wait till next week to pass those out. Foundation of all good qualities is, I forget how many stanzas, 8 or 12, easily memorizable. It outlines the whole Lam Rim teaching. And so just reading that and learning that can be really beneficial to understand the path. I remember, I don't know, a year or 2 after I finished the Discovering Buddhism classes, I said to Robbie, now that I'm on the path, like, what do I need to do? And he looked at me and he just started laughing. He said, you haven't even seen the path yet. And I thought, dog, when will I see it? And then you realize, yeah, it just takes a while. But it is a systematic presentation of all the Buddhist teachings, step-by-step guide that we can follow and begin to get on the path, I guess. And we'll talk more about that. Tonight, and actually the next 3 classes, we'll talk a little bit more about the Lam Rim. And there are 3 principal aspects of the path. And Lama Atisha taught the 3 principal aspects. And actually, Geshe-la, the Wednesday night teachings, have been on the 3 principal paths of the Lam Rim. And their renunciation, their bodhicitta, and the wisdom of emptiness. And these are the focus of what we all need to be considering. Renunciation is to really begin to have that understanding of suffering, to realize from the bottom of your heart that suffering exists. There's no way out. There's no way out for any of us. It exists. We're all going to suffer. And want from the bottom of your heart to get out and end and have nothing but the strongest wish for liberation, where you realize samsaric pleasures, you'll enjoy them while they're here. They're not going to last forever. I'll enjoy them, but I want out. I want out. I want out, and have nothing. The foundation of all good quality says unceasingly day and night to generate that mind that, just has that wish. So it's just that strong yearning desire to get out and then help others, no matter how good you have it right now, to really hold that as strong as you can, as powerful as you can. Bodhicitta, it's you want to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of others by helping all others to become enlightened. So it's that altruistic action. You don't just want enlightenment, nirvana for yourself. How could the Buddha become enlightened and then see so much suffering and not even be remotely interested? Like, ha ha ha, I got here. Now, you do have to get there by yourself. The Buddha's not a god. He cannot reach down and help us. He gave us a teaching. He can guide us. All the things that we need to do are there for us to do. But we have to do it. So that, and just generate that wish that spontaneously, without hesitation, we have that wish to want to be of benefit to others. We want to be able to help others. Every worm, W-O-R-M. I always say worm, but it's somebody else say it. Worm. The cockroach, ant. Cockroach is an ant, I can say. Everything. All sentient beings, we want to help. We want them to become enlightened. We don't want them to suffer. We want them to be happy and have that in the bottom of our heart. And then the wisdom is to realize how things exist and how phenomenon exists. And it's specifically that everything exists dependent on something else. And we'll talk about that dependent existence more in our next class. And the path we take to realize this as Buddhists, we have a dual aspect. We have meditation to build concentration, as well as this experiential realization of the teaching. And then we have our practices that we do to build, positive karma, those virtuous actions. Do we increase positive karma and letting go of the non-virtuous actions or negativity? So, any questions about these? We're going to move on to karma and rebirth. And then we'll come back to these three, renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom of realizing emptiness in the next two sessions as well. Yes, good. Sorry. No, please.
I forgot the term now. Is it Mahayan tradition?
Mahayana.
Mahayana. Are the Four Noble Truths only part of the Mahayana, or is it part of all the different types of Buddhism?
I think it's part of all, right? Yeah, good.
Okay.
Chris said yes. It's part of all the types of Buddhism. There's only a little bit of nuances. One of them is the view of the mind, and the other is the view of that wisdom realizing emptiness. What is emptiness? And so there's a little bit of divergence what that means. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Four Noble Truths are the foundational teaching that the Buddha gave for all who follow this path. Geshe-la gave a teaching. It was a 5 or 6 week teaching on the different schools and the beliefs and how the Mahayana reached where we are and the differences in the schools. And yeah, I said, I'm just here for osmosis. I'm just going to take it in, and then maybe in one of my next lives it'll ripen and I'll be able to say, oh, I remember that. But not stuck yet. Any other questions before we move on? And if anything pops up, we can always go back, so always ask. Okay. Keep asking questions, that's good. Okay. So, probably right behind the Four Noble Truths is a little bit of an understanding of karma and rebirth. They're really close to Buddhist practice and Buddhist philosophy and beliefs. And we'll just explore them just a little bit. karma is that basic principle that everything has a cause. It's the law of cause and effect. And it's really important to understand this in terms of the three principal aspects of the path, those three aspects and suffering and why we suffer. And because the mind is non-physical, it can only be produced by something non-physical. So each moment of mind is preceded by a previous moment of mind. We have so many thoughts happening in the snap of a finger. It's 64 thoughts in a snap of a finger. Anybody got all 64 that just went through your mind? We don't have a clue. We see one biggie pop up, and if we even recognize a thought, usually we have some outburst of emotion, not even realizing a thought was there. But there's constant moments of mind. And each moment of mind had a previous moment of mind. So when you talk about the continuity of consciousness, which is the Buddhist word for rebirth or reincarnation, I know some traditions use the word reincarnation. It's continuity of consciousness, and that's the basis for rebirth in the Buddhist perspective. So just on a practical level, just think for a moment what you did earlier today. And most of us don't think, well, what preceded what we did today? But everything preceded. You know, your alarm went off, that woke you up. You know, you thought to get out of bed because you had to go to work or school or take care of kids or whatever. You know, you got out of bed. And then, you know, you follow your usual routine, some out of habit. But do you remember what you ate for breakfast? And what was the moment before you ate? You probably had to cook it, whatever. And then what did you do last night before you went to bed? You didn't wake up this morning without going to bed last night. So there was a physical cause and law, cause and effect. And then there was a thinking cause and effect that kind of went along with that. And what about a few days ago? Do you remember the weekend? You know that if we're here on a Tuesday, there was a Saturday and Sunday. I forgot already, but I know it was there. What about 5 or 10 years ago? Just think how old you are. Think about, what you did 5 or 10 years ago, and how did that lead you to where you are today? And then keep going back. We're adults, right? We're adults sitting here. So we were children before we could become adults, right? And so, do you have any childhood memories? I don't have hardly any, but my husband has vivid childhood memories. Some of them when he was an infant. He can remember great details about his childhood. But I know I was a child. I know I was a baby. I know I was cared for. You can kind of remember that. And you were born. Most of us don't remember being born. But there are some people who have vivid memories of their birth. And then before you were born, you were in your mother's womb. We probably don't remember that, but we were there. And there was that moment of conception before we grew in the womb. And then what happened before that moment of conception? There had to be another moment of mind before our consciousness entered at that time, right? Because every moment of mind is preceded by another moment of mind. So that had to be there as well. There are children who have vivid memories of previous lives. They're studied. I can't remember, is the University of Virginia different than Virginia Tech? Yes. I think it's the University of Virginia. He's a psychiatrist working with other scientists that were interviewing parents and kids, and he wrote a whole book. I haven't read the book. We have it. I've only read excerpts from it, and it's fascinating. The children, usually before the age of 4, have vivid memories of their past lives. Some, the parents took them to their previous homes and even met their previous birth parents. I mean, it's really, really fascinating. Now, I had 2 things to happen. One was here at the center. We had a young woman who started, And she started because a few years before that, and she's since moved away, but her family went to Greece for a vacation, their first time there. And I remember there was some urgency of getting back to a ship. So maybe it was a cruise line, and they were in Greece, and there was this urgency of getting back, and they were lost. They were panicking, and they couldn't find it. And she said she just had this sense of calm. And she said, oh, I know exactly where we are. Turn right here. The next street is this. There's going to be a house there. She could describe the houses. She could describe what the street looked like. She remembered the street names, and she had never been to Greece before. And she said then that it was the most powerful experience, and she knew she had lived there. So that really stuck with me. And then I had a woman that I worked with who I was volunteering at the Wake County Health Department, and I don't talk about politics, and I don't talk about religious beliefs with anybody. And she said, I want to ask you a question. And she said, I heard you're Buddhist. And I was like, oh, wait, no, no. And I said, yes. And she was a pretty devout Christian. And I was just waiting for it, so let me save you, or whatever was going to come next. And she said, will you talk to my daughter? She's drawing pictures, and she said she started drawing, it could make me cry, when she was 2 or 3, and she's drawing her other mommy and daddy and brother. And she describes in details what happened to them. And she said the pictures are getting more and more elaborate, and she said, I know it's real. I know it's real. I know she lived before. I know these are her parents. So it was just fascinating talking to this little girl, and I kept saying, you need to go and talk to this guy in Virginia. Anyhow, and you all may know of these stories. You might have vivid memories. Most of us don't, or most of us forgot. But if we were the Buddha, we would remember. We would be clear of obscurations. We could go further back and remember our continuity of consciousness for as long as we can. And what the Buddha realized is there is no beginning, and there is no end, that our consciousness always had to have another moment of consciousness, our mind, and that when we die from a Buddhist belief, our consciousness will go on. And if you remember, and it will go on until we break that cycle and become enlightened. So that's our whole goal, to get out of samsara. We don't want to cycle back around. We want to get out. And if you remember, we talked about the levels of consciousness, that we have this gross level, which we're in now. We're taking things in through our senses. We have constant thoughts, and then we know that there's a subtler level. We know that there's a subconscious level, that every once in a while things will bubble up, or you get a gut feeling, or maybe at night when you're sleeping, your subconscious mind kind of begins to, something percolates up through your gross level of mind. So we have a little bit of realization of that subtle level. And then another level of mind, the third level, is a very subtle level of mind. We talked about that pure, clear luminosity. That's that third subtle level of mind. They say when you sneeze, if it wasn't so quick, and if we were a little closer to enlightenment, you could reach that subtle level of consciousness then. There's other types of activities that where you can see that mind if we were closer on the path to enlightenment. But it's that subtle level that extends back. It's that that's the continuity of consciousness that always was and always will be. Now, it's not us, it's not our personality, it's with all of our jokes and our quirkiness. It's not Karen. Who knows what I'll come, I don't want to think about what I'll come back like, but it's not me. I'll show up as somebody else or something else, it could be a roach, it could be, it could be a flea, like who knows what we could come back as. Now some might argue, yeah, that's Karen, but it still won't look like me. It's really not me. But it's that subtle consciousness that holds our karmic seeds. That's the only thing we came into this life with, and that's what we're going to leave with, is that subtle consciousness from every action, every thought, every word we said created those karmic seeds that are implanted there. Other traditions have more of an idea of a self that goes on to heaven, or a soul, which is more like you have this independent, existing mini you. I went to my neighbor's father died, and I went to the funeral, and they talked about her father was in a wheelchair at the end and pretty sick, and they talked about he's now as healthy as he ever was, and he's walking, he walked, you know, so they see a very physical self continuing, and that's a little bit different than what Buddhism sees as continuing on. And so, yep, go ahead, and then I'll talk about definitions.
I'm just wondering if, you know, if a good person like you, wouldn't you come back as something better than a cockroach, and say a murderer would come back as something lesser? Or is there any connection to the life you live and what you'll come back as? There is a connection. So that's the good news. But you don't know when karma is going to ripen. So we are just like barely touching the surface. People study karma in depth, and still, you know, it's still tough to really get an understanding of what karma is. But in theory, if you only do positive deeds and you get rid of all non-virtuous deeds, every angry thought that you have, in theory, our goal is to get a better a human rebirth, and I make that wish every day. If I've got to come back, which in all likelihood I'm coming back, I want a human rebirth. I want to find Buddhism sooner than I found it now. I want to be born in a family in the Mahayana tradition. I want to find the Dharma with perfect teachers. I make that wish every single day. Does that mean I'm going to come back as a human? No, because I was a mass murderer, I was a rapist, I lied, I cheated, I stole. Who knows how many times for countless eons. We all did all those things. And maybe I got this great karma to come back as a person now and find Buddhism, but maybe another seed's going to ripen at the time of my death and I'm going to come back as a cockroach. Now, Geshe-la keeps saying, oh, don't worry about that. I can't help but worrying about that. But the good news is we come back. The good news is we burn off that negative karma. You know, cockroaches only live a couple of weeks. I'll get smashed. I'll burn off that negative karma, and then maybe then I'll be able to come back as a person. You know, not a guarantee. And you know, if you're a murderer, there's lots of murderers who've come back as people. Look around. Look how many murderers there are today. Oh, I won't. We're going to talk about karma, but if they didn't murder in their past lives, they weren't coming back as a murderer in this life. So they still got to come back as a person. And they're still murderers. Anyhow, interesting. Yes?
So on my dad's side of the family, which is like Japanese, they're Pure Land Buddhists.
Yes.
Which have a little bit different feeling. It's almost like kind of like a heaven, you know. Not exactly.
Yes,
but kind of
we're Pure Land Buddhists as well.
Kind of like a heaven. And my mom, when she passed, we had her ceremony at the Chicago temple.
And hoped that she would be in the Pure Land.
Right. And then on like a monthly basis, you'll have kind of a respect for the people who have passed, like my grandpa and that kind of thing. Which isn't. I mean, it's a little bit different. You know, I mean, it's a different sect of.
It's really
of Buddhism,
not.
But
We do the same thing here.
Okay.
So. Without going into, because you will talk, they talk about, I think they talk about the Pure Lands and discovering Buddhism. I'm not positive now, but you do have a Pure Land in this tradition, and that would be our hope, is that we can get enough virtuous karma, if not in this life, in a life soon, that we would go to this Pure Land where we can just practice and practice and practice and get closer to enlightenment, and then maybe not even come back. Maybe just to become enlightened while we're in the Pure Land.
And after somebody dies, we just had a special ceremony for one of our dear members who died a few weeks ago. And it's, you know, every 7 days. And we're not necessarily good about that, but you know, we had that ceremony for him in 7 days, and you would have another one again in 49 days. But every 7 days you would, and every day I just think about him. May Jim be born in the Pure Lands. May he, you send that wish, because it takes about at least 7 days up to 49 days to cycle back through before we're reborn, and we'll talk about that again. So it's similar. Good.
Can I just add one thing?
Please.
Never mind about murdering. Harsh speech and gossip and anger is negative, generates a lot of negative karma. And I practice that every day.
Yeah, we're good at it, right? That's our
Unfortunately,
habit. And what scares, and so this is why I think, oh my gosh, I could come back as a cockroach. They say one angry word, 1 second of anger can wipe out eons of positive merit. Eons of positive merit. So anyhow, the good news is we can purify some of that, and we'll talk about that too, which I try to do every day too, since I keep adding to the pool and trying to take it away. But it does get easier because we can change, and so I can change my automatic habit, and it's changing. I still have lots of purification to do, because these habits came from past lives, and I'm good at it. Okay, so quick definitions. Cyclic existence, we're born, age, die, and then we're reborn. It's Groundhog Day over and over again. And it's that very subtle consciousness that's doing that. And this is really what we call samsara. So this is that all-pervasive compounded suffering that we're in now, and we're caught in that cycle, and we're going to keep coming back. Human rebirth is considered the best, because if we can't get to the Pure Lands, this is our best method to practice. We can think, we can reason, we know non-virtuous acts, we know virtuous acts. So it's a good place to be. And so with rebirth, it's that stream of very subtle energy that's just reestablished in a new body, conditioned by karmas of a previous birth. And we'll discuss that a little bit more. And then samsara is this cyclic existence, that beginningless, recurring cycle of death, rebirth, aging. And we have it's like a 12-wheel cycle that we keep a picture of out front. Rebirth and karma are hard topics to swallow. So take it as your hypothesis, sit on it, think about it. Where do you think your mind came from? What do you think happened before birth? What do you think is going to happen to you after you die? And there's lots of different beliefs and different paths. This one is not for everybody. This is just to give you a taste of what, of Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist beliefs. I'm telling you, once you start studying this and you look at the science backing it, it's like, holy cow, And one of the scientists asked His Holiness, what will you do if science proves that rebirth doesn't exist, or there's no such thing as karma? And His Holiness says, then we'll have to rethink the whole thing. Because so far science has caught up with Buddhism, not the other way around. So karma can be this very, we use the term all the time, right? It's become very popular in the West. And, people have different sayings with karma. What do you think karma means? Any thoughts? You heard anything for those who come to the center here? How do you use karma? Have any of you ever used karma in any way in your everyday life? What do you say about karma? Yeah? What do you say? Wait.
If you do something good, something good will come back to you. Or if you do something bad is going to happen to you.
That's right. Yeah. And on a simple form, that's karma, right?
Anybody else have any thoughts that they say? So karma is action, is what karma means. In Buddhism, it's been studied for over 2,500 years, and it's a really deep topic. We'll just kind of scratch the surface just a little bit. It's actually not really easy to fully understand it all. And karma results from, it's kind of what Hetty said, every action of body, speech, and mind. Don't have to be a murderer. Every action of body, speech, and mind. They're referred to as the 3 doors in Buddhism. Karma results. Actually, Venerable Rabina uses the term intention rather than action. I'm not sure what the difference is there. Action's what you usually hear. So if you think about it on a mundane level, you know people who are great musicians. Maybe they practice piano all their lives and they're great pianists, or maybe it's a sport or an art that they practice, and they practice that behavior over and over again, and they're really skilled at it. And that action of practice left the imprint to strengthen those habits, and it left the imprint on the mind to do these worldly things today. Probably they practiced in a past life playing the piano or being a good artist, and it still led them to do that in this life. And the Buddhist concept is that every single action leaves an imprint on your mind, that seed that we talked about when we were talking about rebirth. And that seed will ripen, and we will experience it in the future. So if you do something good will come back. If you do something bad will come back. Not usually in this lifetime, but at some point it will. And it's the law of cause and effect. It's true on a physical level. We know scientifically every cause has an effect. It's the law of cause and effect. You can't have an effect without a cause. And Buddhism showed that it's the same with your mind. It's a law of cause and effect. You can't have this mind without some sort of a cause that happened before. We may not remember it, but it was there. And often we think of bad karma. So we think, I wouldn't want to have that karma. Or, you think of a Hitler, or you think of somebody that just did atrocious things, and you just wouldn't want to have that karma. But karma is also good action. So it's also, when we do virtuous actions, you get positive seeds. You don't just collect negative seeds. You collect both. And you want to think that, so if you're comfortable now in this life, and you all obviously were healthy enough to come here, and you were born in a place where you can practice religious freedom in a city in the South that has one of the strongest Buddhist centers in the United States, if not internationally, you must have did something in your past life to get you here. And if you have even the luxury to drive a car and come here or get a ride here, you probably practiced generosity in a past life to get to where you are now. So if you want to think about what your future's going to look like, think about what you're doing now. And if you practice generosity now, then you're more than likely to have, luxuries in a future life, to have wealth in a future life. So there's really important to think about what karma is and what it's not. So it is not random. Every action has a result, period. There's no randomness about any results you have right now or you're going to have in the future. And there's no cosmic scoreboard. There's nobody putting little ticky marks down there. Robbie calls it a psychology of the mind. It's just happening. It's just happening. There's nobody keeping score. Venerable Tendron always says there's no karmic scoreboard. There's nobody out there keeping track for you. Actually kind of scary, because when I was a kid, I used to think, maybe God didn't see that, You'd go to confession and lie in the confessional, and you would think, well, maybe the priest didn't know I was lying, And you knew then, yeah, sure, God saw you, and now, yeah, karma's there. It's putting those little seeds in. You can't hide. Your actions leave an imprint. It's also to see karma as a punishment or as a reward, and it's neutral. There's no judgment. There's no punishment or reward, and it's not meant to have any judgment at all with that. It's just this neutral system of seeds collecting, positive and negative. So the results we're experiencing now were from our previous actions in our previous life. And what we're doing now will affect us in a future life. It's usually not immediate. Like we have that saying of instant karma. Instant karma is going to get you. It's usually not instant. If somebody if you punch somebody in the nose and they punch you back, that's a law of cause and effect, right? Not necessarily karma. If you jump out a window, you're going to fall. Well, probably jumping out the window had something to do with karma. But once you're falling, you're going to hit the ground, and you're going to be hurt, if not killed. That's a law of cause and effect, similar to karma. They say the only immediate things that could happen is like if you were really generous to a teacher, you might have could even get instant enlightenment. Something positive is going to happen. Or if you do something really terrible, like killing a lama or killing your parents, your mom, and especially your mom, but your mom and your dad are really revered in Buddhism because they gave us this life. And if you would kill one of those, that's considered really bad juju, and you could get immediate karmic reactions from that. Not necessarily. So those are things that karma's not. And what karma is, you have 4 laws of karma, and you have 4 aspects of karma. So the first law of karma is that karma is definite. Virtuous actions always produce happiness or virtuous results, and non-virtuous actions always produce suffering, future suffering, always, always. We get this on a physical level, right? If you plant an apple seed, a lemon tree is not going to grow. Only an apple seed is going to grow from an apple seed, and it's the same with karma. Karma expands over time, so generosity can produce great wealth, and non-virtuous actions can produce huge, huge sufferings. There's no result without a cause. So you will never experience a result of which you have not created a cause. Everything we're experiencing was caused by our own past actions, not anybody else's actions, didn't come from anybody else, didn't come from our parents, came from our karma. So we can only experience the karmic results of our own actions. Now we may experience something collectively. We're all in this room together, so we all found this center, and that's probably just our collective karma ripening, or I should say our individual karma ripening collectively at the same time is probably the better way to say that. People that are in a tsunami together or an apartment fire, they had the karma for that result was there. It all happened to ripen, and they're experiencing their own karma at the same time. And then karma is not lost. So actions always produce a result, no expiration date. Unless the karmic imprints are purified, weakened, or destroyed, they will always ripen. And we might not have any idea. Well, we don't have any idea except what we did in this life, but I can't even imagine what we did in another life that could ripen. Yes, I think you had your hand up first. You guys are so good.
Thank you. So I've been reading a lot lately about the law of attraction. Is the law of karma the same as the law of attraction, or related in any sort of way?
Maybe. I don't believe so. The law of attraction pops up every once in a while, but it has nothing to do with Buddhism. But, it's that whole idea. Oh, this is a long story. When I first read that book, I met this woman waiting in line somewhere, and we really hit it off really well. And then I saw her at a grocery store a few months later, and I followed her out of the grocery store. Oh, geez.
I'm surprised she didn't call the cops. And I said, I think there's some reason why we're seeing each other again. You know? Like there must be some connection. No, you know, I don't know what that is. Not karma, though. But, you know, if you do good things, you're attracted to good things. If you're around good people, you're attracted to good things. If you're around people doing bad things, I always told my kids, it's you're guilty by association. You're not that they listened, but you're guilty by association. So it's that, but so, you know, it's that. Did that answer your question? Yeah. The law of attraction is kind of interesting and powerful to me, just different than this.
So for karma, I understand like the tsunami example is excellent, but then what about groups of people? So like you talked about Hitler and the Holocaust, and so groups of Jewish people or groups of African American people, especially in America, like how is that? I wouldn't see that as karma, especially if it's a man-made situation happening to a certain group of people. So I don't know if you have any thoughts.
What'd you say?
Same thing.
Same thing. It's the exact same thing, but we see it through our eyes as Hitler created that, and all the, you know, all his comrades around him supported that and bought into it. And then you had a whole group of innocent people who did nothing. You know, there is no judgment. There is no punishment, but it's their karma ripening, that they ripened under Hitler, and you know, it's their karma that ripened. But I'll tell you my thoughts on that after we get another question.
Since I'm coming from India, basically karma is a big thing in India because it is one of the Hinduism adapted.
That's right.
Yeah, so every action, everything that you do, everyone will always not blame on something. They'll say it's the karma what you did in the previous thing is coming back on you in a very bad way.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, you're talking, this is the norm that everyone lives there by. Okay, if I do this, I know what I'm going. They know it. They know.
Right. They know.
Fact, they know.
They accept it.
They accept it, and they know what is coming out of that. So it's like it's awareness of this karma is always there constantly with every people in India all the time.
And see, we don't have that awareness because we weren't born and raised there.
That's it. Yeah, because
but
the
it's
culture, the practices of Hinduism.
That's right.
Is the thing a part? The karma is a part of the culture, and the practices that they do in India. So that's why it is kind of there for everyone to know behind the thing you do. You know what's going to come back to you.
And that's why, I mean, they're upset when bad things happen, but it's like, well, you know, no sense getting more upset. It's karma. No punishment, no reward, just that realization that it's there. So for me, when I look at something like a tsunami hitting or anything, I look at Hitler, all the injustices I see in the world, and what makes sense for that. Like, does God make sense? Like, I think about, like, when I was little, I would ask my mom, I would ask the nuns, why does God punish people living in Bangladesh? Like, why don't they have enough food? Oh, it's God's will. Why would God let them starve? Like, that never sat well with me. Now, karma's just this neutral kind of clicking along, and I know those people are suffering. I wish they stopped suffering. You know, and they will, because they're burning off karma. Hitler went to hell. In a Christian viewpoint, he went to hell to burn forever. In a Buddhist viewpoint, he can burn off his negative karma and come back as who knows what. He'll burn for a long time. You know? So who knows when he'll come back, but he could. He'll be a cockroach for eons and eons. So there is instant karma. No, go ahead.
So Karen, I'm looking at it from a spiritual standpoint when I'm thinking about karma, and also from reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at it. Can we look at karma as whatever those lessons that we haven't learned in a previous life that we're learning in this life? Because I know it's a choice to reincarnate, and typically when we incarnate, we continue that
Gotcha.
that rebirth in order to learn more of what we didn't learn in the previous life. That's how my thinking
Yep,
is.
yep.
So can we look at karma in that sense?
Kind of, but not really, because one, we don't have a choice how we come back. Until we're a high-level bodhisattva or a Buddha, we can't, like, we have lamas. Lama Yeshe, this guy here right behind, on to the left, thank you. I said right, I knew that wasn't right. So Lama Yeshe, when he died, when he was dying, he picked his birth parents. He was like, oh, I want to come back as Spanish. And and he met this lovely Spanish couple and said, yeah, that's who I'm coming back as. And he did. You know, we don't have that luxury. So it's not like you're picking up where you left off. You've planted those seeds. Those seeds are going to ripen. Right now we have no control. We're just being thrown into cyclic existence without any control of when they'll ripen. But do they carry on? Absolutely. So that if we practice, Venerable Rabina uses a story about this 4-year-old boy that she said fishing, he was like a magnet to fishing. Parents never fished. They didn't even own a fishing rod. They were Buddhists. They didn't believe in killing. Magnet to fishing. He would fish all day long. That karma came from a past life. That's what he practiced. So it wasn't like he was trying to get out of practicing that. He jumped right back into it and kept practicing it over and over again.
So you're saying that we don't have a choice when through rebirth, we don't have a choice of whether to reincarnate or not to reincarnate?
Oh yeah, you will reincarnate. That's law of cause and effect. We just don't have a choice of how we're coming back. You got something to add to that, Chris?
Well, that's what samsara is. That's what samsara is. Uncontrolled rebirth. It's not controlled by you. It's controlled by your karma. And so when you can break out of that loop and then control your own rebirth, then you can help even more other sentient beings get to enlightenment.
Yep. So you can't even consciously say, man, I need to work on this. I'm coming back to work on it. We can't even, nothing.
When I took my Buddhism class in college 25 years ago, I learned that in that class I learned that the Buddha, once he, through peri-nirvana, had attained nirvana, and he was breaking out of the cycle of suffering and rebirth and samsara, that he decided that he would teach, he would attempt to teach, even though everybody would have to learn on their own, that there was no real way to explain what he had realized and had attained, but if he hadn't tried, then everybody would be stuck in samsara forever.
Yes,
So.
exactly. And they say that a Buddha not only can choose, they could be a dog, they could be the cockroach in our house trying to teach us some kind of a lesson, and they can come back in many bodies. It's not necessarily just one or a person when we're a Buddha, and then we could help lots of people. Yes.
I was so on board with the pursuit of happiness, and the concept of rebirth kind of took me on a side road. And so it almost felt like they're still going back to religion, and that there's some sense of judgment that's inherent at the end of your life, or it's a continuum of life, I guess. But I guess your comments about karma is that there really is no judgment. There's just karma that's determining your rebirth. And
it's our actions that are determining our rebirth. It's our actions.
And I guess I can understand. It'll take time to get a hold of that, but
I know.
But it seemed like Buddhism was based on a lot of scientific evidence and a lot of common sense of just like the pursuit of happiness. And why am I doing these things? It was to find happiness in this life, and it is my control. It is all these things that I control through practice, and that made sense, and that was attractive. But but this concept of rebirth. And so I guess I'm struggling with like the scientific evidence of rebirth. And
I know.
there has to be writings. And so if there's like suggestions on how to get over that kind of a hump.
Well, there are, and the Lam has details on meditations we can do. We'll go through a little bit of those when we talk about dependent existence and some things that you can do to think about. There are meditations on karma and how you can come to terms with that. So, and the science is the law of cause and effect, right? And on a physical level. Unfortunately, like in India and Hinduism, the law of cause and effect with the mind, that it's always been there. It's just not familiar to us. So we're all learning and struggling with this. And it sounds like a judgment. It sounds like, you know, and it's not like when something bad happens to me that you say, oh man, I must have really been a crappy person in a past life, you know. Although I do think that, I think, well, I broke my arm. I fell and broke my arm. And then like within 6 months, I broke my wrist, and then I broke my ankle, I broke my wrist, and I broke my elbow. Within like, yeah, it was ridiculous. And so I went to pick up Geshe-la, and Geshe Songpo was there, and he said, oh, you have a broken elbow now. He said, oh, I rejoice for you. And I like looked at him, like rejoice wasn't the last thing on my mind. He says, think of the negative karma you've burned off. And it was like, oh, okay. So it actually helped, like it just, I thought, I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to rejoice that, all right, I got rid of some negative karma. So you can't pursue happiness while you're thinking about karma. Well, that changes everything. I know.
The other thing that I would add is that His Holiness says, you know, like these are our teachings, and you have to pick them up and you examine them for yourself. And if you can't believe it and reject it, then put it down. That doesn't mean that you can't, you know, pursue the rest of the teachings.
You keep whatever is
useful.
useful.
Accept whatever you feel is true for you, and if it doesn't feel true to you, then you can put it down and still continue with your teachings. And I think that's an important thing, because you're not the only one that struggles with karma and reincarnation.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like my motivation, is it my personal happiness in this life and to be a better person and help other people be happy, or is it, you know, to do good things so I don't come back as a cockroach? You know,
you're right. It's both, right?
I think having a more positive motivation about why you're doing these things versus a fear or a concern about, you know, if I don't do these things, I think, you know, is, I don't know, just having more positive.
So there's different teachings on different levels for each of us. So for some people, just that fear of not coming back as a cockroach is motivation enough. For me, it's not coming back as a cockroach because I can't continue my practice, because my goal is enlightenment, to help other people. And happiness in this life, it's not necessarily our goal. It's to understand suffering, and so that will lead us to happiness. But our goal is to practice for liberation and to help other people not suffer, you know, etc. So you've got the right altruistic motivation. So for you, that's what you want to keep and head for. And that'll still prevent you from coming back as a cockroach, so you can continue to practice. You get it? Everybody's different, so we'll come at this from different angles. That's why we have 84,000 teachings to choose from. They'll all speak to us differently. And I think my husband is just an incredible Buddhist practitioner, unbelievable. But for years, rebirth, no way, he wasn't buying it. So then he couldn't buy karma, because then karma doesn't make sense if you don't buy rebirth. So he struggled with that for years until he was finally ready, could pick it up and sit with it. And then it just then the whole thing made perfect sense to him. So who knows when it'll ripen to make sense for us. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All that matters is we do good things, to keep doing good things, and that we stop doing negative things. And we will be happier because of that. We will be. Anything else? I know we're out of time, but if there's any other questions before we leave, And we'll pick back up the 4 aspects of karma when we come back. And any questions you bring, just sit with this week if you want, or just ignore it all till we come back next week and talk about it. As you're getting up to leave, dedicate any merit that you gain from this discussion, just so that you'll continue to think about this stuff, and at least what's valuable to you and what you're willing to think about. Everything else, they say, leave on a shelf. Just leave it on a shelf and let it go. If it's upsetting your mind, it's not beneficial. So anything that's upsetting you, you'd let go of right now. We're just exploring anyhow. Doesn't matter. Just exploring. All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming out. And then I'll see you next week.